Good morning, members. Welcome to this All Hallows Eve meeting of the Highland Council. This meeting will be filmed and broadcast over the internet and available for viewing for 12 months thereafter. Members in the chamber should turn their mobiles and laptops to silent, and those joining remotely should keep their mics muted unless speaking in debate. It is, of course, the day where those witches, warlocks, and ghosts are out in force, but question time is later in the day, so I'll now ask Stuart Fraser to call the roll.
Thank you, Convener, and good morning, members. So, members, with my fingers crossed, I'm going to ask all of you in the chamber to confirm your attendance by pressing the green button when the voting is open. And hopefully it's open now. Many thanks, members. Everybody's voted. That's fantastic. Thank you. Then I'll confirm the attendance of those who are participating online. Sir Councillor Campbell.
So, present online.
Councillor Dunn.
It's present.
Councillor Barbara Jarvie.
Morning, present.
Councillor McCann.
Present.
Councillor McLennan.
Present.
Councillor McGilvray.
Here in Jamoy, Stuart.
Councillor Morrison.
Morning, Stuart, present.
Councillor Monroe.
Present.
Thank you, members.
Members, any declarations of interest that haven't been previously notified?
Sorry, Convener, I have some apologies. So I have apologies from Councillor Edmondson, Councillor Angela McLean, Councillor MacDonald.
Okay, members, any declarations of interest that you haven't already notified?
Thank you, Convener. So the following members have made declarations of interest. Sorry, in fact, I don't have any declarations of interest. I've only got transparency statement. So I have one transparency statement from Councillor Christie, having had the objective test, reviewed his position in relation to the items and any personal action, and does not consider that he has an interest to declare. And as I say, that's from Councillor Christie in respect of items 5, 7, 50, 16.1, in his capacity as a non-executive director of Chess Highland, 7 in his capacity as a non-executive director of Inverness Bid. Thank you.
Members, your agreement, I intend to, sorry, Councillor Gregg, sorry.
Apologies, Convener, for not doing this earlier. I'd like to make the same transparency statements as Councillor Christie, an employee of NHS Highland.
It's also missed. Members, your agreement, today's meeting will end at 6 p.m. Is anyone opposed to that? And it is, again, with your agreement, my intention to take items 14 and 15 after item 4. Agree that, please? Thank you. Now, members, we have a presentation. Sure.
Excuse me, Convener, it's Andrew Jarvie. I was missed at the roll. I dropped a message, but I think I've been missed.
Well, you know, Andrew. Members, it's a pleasure of mine to introduce Sheila Lundberg and Margaret Insman and Andrew Beck. So, over to you.
I was at an award ceremony sitting next to Bob, and very kindly said, "You should come along and sell." Definitely is. Oh no. I'm Sheila Lundberg, Coordinator Highland Deaf Education Service. Colleague Andrew Begg, Sign Language Tutor with Highland Deaf Education Service. And we're today purely to talk to you about managed to achieve ESL in education. And a little bit of a sort of background. Doesn't seem to. Okay. To give you a little bit of background, pre-1980, deaf kids in Highland were automatically sent away in Aberdeen, Edinburgh, really resulting in lack of communication within the family. They would come home, nobody knew how to sign to them, they couldn't speak to them. And as a result, school became the family for these deaf kids. So family background and all the things you can see here. They were only home maybe twice a year, summer and Christmas, and that was it. Not a lot to try and build a family life on, is it? So in the 1980s, the early 1980s, a base was set up in Dingwall Primary, followed very soon by a base in Dingwall Academy, but the majority of deaf pupils in the early 80s were still being sent away to school for secondary. It was quite a thought, quite a thought. And then 1987 was a bit of a keynote year. It was when the first sign-dependent child started secondary school in Dingwall Academy. Before that, every single sign-dependent pupil in Highland had been sent away to school. And it's not that long ago, because I was taken on to support that child. That's when I started in Highland. So I am as old as I look. So I'm going to hand over to Andrew here to talk about his experiences as a deaf learner in Dingwall, because it's better coming from him than me.
See, I read quite a bit from side here. Especially when I was ability to sing. And I have to put extra, but many factors. And time and signing is based, but not. Provide me less stress. The language. Then we less concentrate. And what I had now for my job, I'd buy a laptop. Really sign with people by a screen. And later. And we all know the exactly what you need. Look, we fill in the gap. Signing. And it was my then headmaster, Kenji. I was bought I'm shooting and a fellow local artisan up to the about me. Unfortunately, I had an entire 19 years later. Missing.
So back to 1987, when the deaf pupil started, the first signing deaf pupil started in the academy. By the time that pupil got fourth year, I was thinking, jeeps, this youngster's going to leave school, no qualifications in his own language. He has never had an opportunity to study his own language. Shocking, absolutely shocking. So in 1991, when he was in fourth year, we introduced, this does date things, a Scot module in BSL. And I thought, if I'm running a class where there was 2 deaf pupils, might as well include hearing pupils as well. So we had our very first class for BSL in the academy, called it Deaf Season. In 1998, I had been campaigning, saying, "Oh, there's not enough, not enough." So I spent most of 1997 and 1998 working with a small writing group, writing SQA units. And we were, as I say, heavily involved in writing them. So SQA units came in. And then 2010, Curriculum for Excellence came in. We were promised the world. We were told, yes, there'll be a National 5 in BSL, no problem at all. So Dingwall Academy thought, yeah, we're going to bite the bullet. We're going to offer BSL as a language option from first year. There were 240 pupils in first year. 80 of them chose BSL as their language option. We couldn't staff that many. A third of the pupils opted for BSL, just couldn't staff it. And then, of course, Curriculum for Excellence didn't actually deliver National 5 in BSL. That came a lot later. So in 2019, National Awards in BSL were introduced. Dingwall Academy was the pilot school. So we're the first to run classes. And then in 2023, last year, was the first class of National Award pupils at SCQ Level 6, which is higher equivalent in BSL. Our class in Dingwall Academy, there were more people doing BSL at SCUF Level 6 than were doing higher French. I think that speaks for itself. Dingwall Academy's BSL journey. We believe we are the only mainstream school in the UK where BSL has been a mainstream subject for over 33 years. We don't know of another school that has done it for that long. Every single pupil going through Dingwall Academy has a taster course in BSL. Every single pupil, whether they pick BSL in the end or not. And from S3, it's a language option. You can just pick it the same way as you would pick French, German, Spanish, whatever. The 2 most popular languages in the school, Gaelic and BSL. 2008, the new Dingwall Academy was built, and it was actually designed deaf pupils in mind. Acoustically, it's superb. It's one of the things that visitors comment on. Quiet the school is. It really genuinely is. That added a grand total of 0.1% to the budget to make it deaf friendly at build stage. And yet, in some of the other some other new schools, they've pulled out the adaptations. Think long and hard. 1% is not a lot, and every single person benefits. It's a very short-sighted measure to pull out simple things that can be built in and try and put them in later when it costs thousands. Current drivers in BSL in Scotland, the BSL Scotland Act, hopefully you're all aware of that. Highland's just recently published its next plan. It places a duty on authorities to promote BSL. The 1+2 languages policy, I'll be coming back to it. That was a policy that came in by the Scottish Government, who realised that Scotland are really poor at languages, really poor. We looked to the continent, and the continent do a great job. Why? Because they introduced it early. Scotland thought, maybe we should be doing the same thing. They introduced 1+2, 1 being your native language, and the 2 being introduce another language from primary 1, and a third language, it's 1 more from primary 5 and up. I'll come back to what Highland did there. And the introduction of the National Awards in BSL, those have absolutely changed the face of BSL, because the National Awards have equal status, almost, with modern languages, which is great. So when 1+2 came out, I thought, oh yes, we can get BSL into the primary curriculum. Sorted the secondary in Dingwall Academy, let's get it in the primary. So I contacted Highland Council and said, oh, can we put in BSL? Oh yeah, great idea. And they put it out to all primary schools as an option. And 29 primaries came in, yeah, we'd like to do BSL. That's great. And then 20 primaries came back a few months later saying, There's nothing out there. There's nothing to buy in. We can't buy any package. There is no teaching package at all on BSL. So a small group was set up, including 3 of us here and one other person, was set up and wrote a pack. So the problem was, how do we introduce a visual language and deliver a BSL course? There's not a signer there. And logistically in Highland, it wasn't. Well, Andrew's one sign tutor. His job is not to teach hearing kids. His job is to teach families and deaf kids. It's not to run around teaching people who quite fancy learning BSL. That's not his job. It's not our job. So how did we do that? How do you make it easy for the teacher when they don't actually sign? 1+2 placed a huge onus on teachers to learn another language and then teach it. It's a huge ask. In one council that I was at, they were told for the third language, it's German. And the teacher said, well, I don't know German. And they were told, buy a higher text and learn. What's this council? I have to say, Highland did 1+2 better than most of the other areas. We really did. So the solution we came up with was a digital pack on a little USB. And it's got lesson plans, it's got all the resources they need, it's got videos of Andrew, gives instructions for all the activity from the video. It's all there on a USB. And in Highland, it's available on SharePoint to every single free of charge. So that was our solution. We started something. So it was part of 1+2. There is literally nothing else like this on the market. No one has ever tried to produce a complete digital language course in BSL. You buy videotapes of stories or CDs, or you can get them online. You can get ones of vocabulary, you can get ones of grammar points, but no one has sought to put the whole lot together into an actual package. By introducing the hard concepts early, our 30 years of experience really paid off. We find the earlier you introduce the different concepts in BSL, and the earlier you get the kids to think visually, the better they will progress. One of the first comments I get when I say I teach BSL is, oh yeah, I know fingerspelling. Yeah, well, I recognise the Greek alphabet and speak Greek. Fingerspelling is not a massively huge part of BSL. It's a completely different language. It's got its own grammar structure. As Andrew said, it's based on concepts. It's not based on vocabulary. And that is really hard to get your head around. It's a very, very different way of thinking about language. This pack has changed perceptions of what you can do digitally. It really, really has. It's shown with the right approach, pupils can make phenomenal progress in BSL in a really, really short space of time. We have never advertised this pack anywhere. And purely on word of mouth, every single authority in Scotland uses it. All of Northern Ireland uses it, and 4 authorities in England, and we have not advertised. It's been used ways we could never have imagined. It was aimed at primary and up, 5, 6 and 7, that was it. It's being used so many different ways. It's being used in conjunction with the first language in 1 to 2. So teachers will say things like, rouge, kids have to sign red, or the teacher will sign yellow, and the kids have to say jaune, that sort of thing. I must admit, when I first heard that, I thought, that's a really stupid idea. And then I saw action, it's a brilliant idea. It's been extended right down to schools. Schools have started using the vocabulary in primary 1, even down to nursery. Pupils have made up their own BSL games, some of which we've stolen. Never once look a gift horse in the mouth. I had secondary schools who are short of language teachers use it as a language course in a secondary school. It's being used for wider achievement awards, interdisciplinary learning, call it what you like. It's been extended, adding in stuff about famous deaf people, technology, and so on. It's being used in Google Classroom. It was useful in lockdown because all the video clips got uploaded onto Classroom so the pupils could watch them. It's been used for activities. And the biggest hit, I would say unexpected, is with ASN pupils in secondary. Pupils who are not coping with modern language. This has been great. Autistic pupils, it's given them a safe, I'm doing really well with this crutch today. It's given them a safe way of discussing facial expression, where it's not about them, it's about a language, and it's then had an on effect. That's what I didn't expect at all. So what has Highland Deaf achieved with regard to BSL? We were the first place in Scotland, in fact in the UK, where BSL was allowed SQA exams. We've developed SQA units in BSL. We've been a pilot for national awards in BSL. We've promoted BSL as a language. 10 of our young pupils who studied BSL in Dingle Academy have gone on to study BSL higher education. 6 of them have become qualified interpreters, and 3 are still in training. That's a lot for one school. It just shows if you've got the will and you've got the funding, things can happen. We've produced a digital pack teaching BSL to mainstream pupils across the UK. It's an absolute award-winning resource. The first ever time that the National Association of Special Educational Needs awarded the prize for innovation in the field of inclusion. It had been on their books, they had never awarded it before. We won it. And probably the one we're most proud of. I'll let Andrew tell you about it.
Yeah, so a few years back, we were nominated by a company called Signature, and Signature is a body that provides sign language qualification for the UK. We were the only Scottish organisation to be nominated, therefore we went down to Manchester for it. Unfortunately, we did not win the award. However, travelling Cup, we had to stop at Perth to change trains. And during our time in the waiting room, I spotted a family of 4 sitting in front of me. And I was just minding my own business. I was signing with my fellow colleagues, and I looked at the family, and it was a mother and a father, a daughter and a son. And the son looked at the mother and signed, "You give me money." There was a vending machine outside the waiting room, and I think he was getting hungry. And I was lip reading the mother and said, "She monkey. No, you cheeky monkey." So I decided to intervene and taught her how to sign cheeky monkey. So I then asked, are any of them deaf? Because it was, I believe it was February. It was in the winter. November.
20, yeah.
And the waiting room had no meetings, so everybody was wearing their hats. So therefore, I couldn't see if anybody was wearing heels. So I asked the mother and said, no, none of us are deaf. So I asked how the son knew how to sign. The son said that he recognised me on video from the BSL 1+2 pack. So that, for me, and to the eyes of my colleague as well, we won. That was the award. Even though we didn't win the nomination, that was our reward. The fact that it became so impactful across the whole of Scotland, and that family actually come from Shire.
So thank you very much for listening. Very happy to take any questions.
No, thank you. Sure, thank you. We just have to continue with the meeting now. So thank you very much. Thank you. I think that was really informative. I think that's something that maybe we'd all be thinking about. I think language courses are available to us. This doesn't sound right. All right, guys, expected a few teething problems with this, so apologies that many of you couldn't hear all of Sheila's presentation, but that's just one of those things. I don't think we're getting any feedback now, so I think that's okay. Members, we now move to item 4 on the agenda, the medium-term financial plan, and I'd just like to introduce Ian Porter.
Okay, thank you, convener, and good morning, members. The report in front of you today is a refresh of the medium-term financial plan and 3-year revenue budget. The report is part of work to prepare for the decisions that you in this chamber will have to make in February, March next year in relation to budget and council tax. As you'll note, the report, it reflects and builds on some decisions made over the past years, including the existing 3 financial plan some of the decisions made back in February, of course, include 54.6 million of agreed budget savings over 3 financial years, as well as decisions in relation to reserves use, their strategy. That existing financial plan clearly is a solid foundation for the Council to build on in terms of refreshing its medium-term financial plan, but the report is clear there is a need to plan for further significant savings over that 3-year period, which of course includes the addition of a new 3rd year enrolling 3-year plan. The report sets some important information in terms of key financial risks facing the Council, highlighting a few particular aspects there. Payout risks is one that's clearly highlighted within the report. In both the current year, looking into next year, I think there are very real challenges that pay award expectations are sitting higher than current and projected inflation levels, and clearly pay award costs and pay costs themselves are such a significant element of the Council's expenditure. So the report is very clear in terms of some of the risks and challenges around pay awards, particularly in an environment where whatever level of grant settlement we receive, there is really a real risk that there is not sufficient funding within that settlement to meet the expectations around pay that may be out there. There is still really uncertainty in terms of grant settlement and government budget implications. Clearly, Chancellor's statement was only yesterday, but I'll perhaps provide a few comments just on that later in terms of my introduction. Delivery of existing budget savings. Very solid foundation, having agreed 54+ million of savings. Clearly, the delivery of them over 3 years, again, is an important factor and also a risk factor in terms of the financial plan. And finally, of course, council tax, one of the key decisions you have to make on an annual basis, and you'll be asked to make early next year, will be in relation to council tax. And again, building on those past decisions you've made in this chamber, those decisions will, of course, be council tax position for balance your budget. But clearly, you've made your past decisions around your Highland investment plan, and past reports highlighted where council tax is a key factor in terms of how you support your investment strategy going forward. The report sets out some financial scenarios, looking at the current position as at February, as well as revising some of those scenarios to look at mid and worst case. I'm very deliberate on language. Worst case, not worst case. We try and plan for a range of scenarios. We try and be prudent and cautious in our approach. However, it can be difficult to plan for all conceivable scenarios. One would equally not want to be planning scenarios that may be considered unlikely or too significant. That said, there remains still considerable risk and uncertainty around some aspects of the financial outlook. So you'll note from the report that the headline budget gap over 3 years stated as potentially up to 132 million. For context, you recall the equivalent figure for the existing 3-year period had been £113 million. So you get a sense of context there. I think the important message, and one I really want to emphasise, that 132, A, is an estimate. B is before we take account of any of the savings, other measures you've already agreed. So I don't use that number to cause undue concern. I think it's important, A, for context, B, for comparability with the position you were facing just over a year ago. But as you note from the report, when one takes account things like the £54 million of savings and other measures already agreed, what's left is a lower number, and as the report highlights, depending on the scenario, potentially it could be up to another £54 million still found over 3 years. Of course, the new 3rd year of the plan represents a significant element of that. So clearly there's a need to plan for further savings and other measures to balance the budget, and the report sets out some of the strategy approaches that will need to be considered, very much building on some of the planning that's been done over the past year. I'll turn now to Chancellor's statement, clearly only made yesterday. There's going to be a degree of time, I think, to fully understand what some of that might mean. And in turn, the report details the timetable in terms of Scottish Government budget. Clearly, national insurance was one of the headlines within the budget stated yesterday. One, they are able to fairly quickly ascertain what the impact of that will be. You'll note from statements yesterday, clearly the national insurance change was twofold. It was an increase in percentage rate that employers will pay, but also a change to the threshold at which employers will pay on individual salaries. So our initial estimate, clearly we'll be doing some further work on this, but the cost pressure of that will be in the region of £8 to £9 million for next financial year. So a very, very significant cost pressure, of course, above anything else that might have to be managed in next year's budget. So I say we'll be doing some further work to analyse that number, further work in terms of the other aspects of the Chancellor's statement that we can assess at this stage. But just as one example, I think a figure that we can be reasonably confident in, £8 to £9 million would be the cost pressure of that NI change. Clearly, how much funding goes through to local government overall is currently unknown. You will note from the statement clearly there was since made around investment to public service, etc., etc. Ultimately, the Scottish Government budget will be we understand better what that might mean for the council. Again, I think those numbers just emphasise that clearly additional savings will be required. I mean, the national insurance pressure alone, when you look at some of the modellings done, sits there and is, it's almost equivalent to the full cost of all inflationary pressures that the council provide for in the current year. So I think that context is important. Turning to reserves, the report also just reminds members both of strategy you did agree in December of last year, a reminder of almost the two key component parts of your reserves, earmark reserves, so those specific funds that have been set aside for particular purposes, a number of which, of course, through your strategy are based on using reserves for investment, to support change, to support transformation. And out with those sums, obviously that general 3% contingency that you have agreed to retain to allow the council to manage unforeseen events. But I say other than that 3%, with the totality of the reserves, while the council is in a healthy reserves position in terms of those cash figures, important to emphasise you have already decisions, allocations and commitments. So other than the 3%, there are clear purposes for each and every one of those. I think it's important just to remind you of that. Final point, again, within the report, particular recommendation for consideration today relates to the land banking fund. The report sets out, and you may recall past reports, obviously there had been a flexibility given to the council in terms of its use of land banking or council tax on second homes, which through Scottish Government directing would have been on an annual basis used to top up our land banking fund. We got a temporary dispensation not to do so. This was a kind of post-COVID era flexibility, recognising the challenge that councils were facing at that time. What we have done in the subsequent period is prudently set aside the funding that allows us to repay that money into the land banking fund. That has already provided for. What the report is seeking from you is that formal decision to do so. And that will therefore put that additional £6.3 million back into the land banking fund, subject to your decision today. So nothing more from me at this stage. Really happy to pick up any questions.
Councillor Loudon.
Thank you, Mr. Porter, for the presentation. As ever, it was very detailed and informative for members across the chamber. I think the first task I have is to say that I'll move the recommendations at the appropriate time. But there were a number of items that have already appeared, comment in the press, and I think the important thing for us here is that this is a very early stage in the budget setting process. It's the very initial look at where our direction of travel will be, the budget this year. There are three things every year that we have a look at. First of those is income generation. The second is cost reduction, and the third, use of reserves. So in terms of income generation, this year has seen some positive changes. I refer in particular to the work that was done on the store project in Skye. That was work from members, work from communities, and work from officers. This is, I think, a sign that the council is less risk averse maybe than it was in the past, and we're prepared to try and do things to minimise the cuts we have to make by generating income. And I hope that that activity will be welcomed across the chamber. In terms of cost reductions, we've set specific targets for that, and we'll be monitoring those in service committees and in corporate resources to make sure that we're getting after the targets that we'd set. And the third thing is use of reserves. We also have to look at reserves, but what we have in there is a very large position in comparison to where we've been historically. In terms of the budget, and I'll comment very briefly on that, there was a headline number of additional funding for Scotland, which seemed a positive number. Clearly, there's a significant effect from the increases in national insurance contributions, both in terms of the threshold and in terms of the change in the percentage. So the number that was quoted will clearly not be what feeds through, but it was still, I think, slightly better than I'd expected to hear. So we will be getting after the targets that we set last year. If we can stick our income generation target, if we can hit our cost reduction target, we won't have to dip into reserves too much, but we will have to get after, as the council should do every year, look for best value in everything that it does, and we'll be doing that as part of the budget setting process. So at that point, I think it would be reasonable for me to move the recommendations. I'll be looking for a seconder, and I think Councillor Munro will be trying to draw the attention of the convener to him online. But I move the recommendations as set out in the report and look for a seconder.
Councillor Christie.
Yes, thank you, convener. This report is much more than just an early look at where we are. It's also about relationships. It's about relationship between the UK government and the Scottish government, and it's about the relationship between the Scottish government and local authorities. And I fear about the second part. I do fear for the relationship between the Scottish government and local authorities based on the evidence, based on COSLA's representations, based on the breakdown of Verity House agreement and reneging of the promises that were put up in that by the Scottish government. And I think we are venturing, as Mr. Porter says in his report, to make new and additional savings to, at this moment of time, potentially 54 million. This report talks about that cash, and we all think, flat cash, isn't that great from the Scottish government? Flat cash represents 10.7 million reduction in our budget. That's more than the national insurance figure that was mentioned Mr. Porter. So when you're faced with a reduction of potentially 10 million of flat cash and an increased cost of 8 million in insurance, I start to worry about the 54 million in terms of a real value as being a reduction. There's a lot in here that we need to be concerned about for the future. And I think it's flagging up potential risks, potential dangers that we need to take account of. We still have inflation much lower than previously, but it still means that prices are going up. It just means they're going up not so fast as they were. We still have expensive pay awards. We still have a situation where, if you look at it, we have a government in Scotland that apparently values local workers at a lower percentage increase rate for pay awards than other sectors. And we've seen that's been evidenced by the increases health, police, fire, and services got. And I don't dispute that they deserve those increases, but it shouldn't be at the expense of our workforce. And we already know that the pay claims coming in for our workers in our authority and other local authorities higher than what is inflation, and that will then feed into the 54 million. I have an amendment to make can be put into the chat so we don't wear out this new expensive voting system and have to replace quickly. Could just be accepted with far easier, Derek. So if you could do that, that would be very helpful. It's not a difficult amendment. It just calls a late report to the next council on initial thoughts from the Scottish Government budget. So I'm sure that could easily be accepted. To refuse that would seem strange. Focusing in on 8.8, which is the actions that could be taken, and I think it's useful, Mr. Porter, to lay that out. A review of existing and agreed savings and scope to increase, accelerate, and expand on those. That's perfect sensible, and we should be doing that. A review of savings options or proposed developed for February 24, but not taken forward. I'd like to formally request that those proposals be issued to all members of council so we can see them and perhaps evaluate them, and perhaps, convener, you could take my request on board or that, and to see if those papers could be circulated because they're presently being used to me. For the review of income generation, I totally agree, and as Derek said, we'd all be agreeable to that, but not at the expense of putting small community groups out of business when they're renting our facilities, not at the expense of excluding folk from our services because they can't afford it. So there's got to be caveats and balance. The fiscal flexibilities, I think we all agree, the future budget savings will be produced in due time by the administration, and we're more than happy to take part in any discussions when called upon to do so on those. The budget engaged report, I think, is a bit weak, to be honest. I would have liked to have seen something better out like we had in the previous budget papers when we were leading up to that, with rough dates and timelines as what might be happening in a particular month, and maybe that could be worked up because at the moment it's pretty weak. I think we need to flag this out. Such a short window of time from the Scottish budget through to when we set our council tax is only a couple of months. So trying to factor in budget engagement was done pretty successfully last year. Thanks, pretty successfully this year. I would just urge for that bit to be looked at again. I move my amendment, which I believe will be seconded by Councillor Stewart. Thank you.
There was the intention to bring a paper to December Council in any case. We don't have a problem there. Councillor Callum Monroe.
Thank you, convener. Just Councillor Loudon sought a seconder for the motions he's just moved, so I'd like to second the recommendations. Thank you.
Councillor Campbell Sinclair.
Thank you, convener. Members, last week the Council held a housing summit, bringing together a wide range of partners to discuss solutions to the Highland housing challenge. One of the commitments made by the Council at the summit was to top up the land bank fund by the sum outlined in the report at recommendation number 7. I'm therefore delighted to support the repayment into the Land Banking Fund of £6.308 million from funds set aside. As members will be aware, the Land Bank Fund is used to support the delivery of affordable housing, which is more important now than ever. The future use of this fund will be reported regularly through the Housing and Property Committee as part of the move towards the Single Property Service. It's also important to send out a wider message along with this agreement today. Next week, the E&I Committee will consider papers relating to the call sites and amendment rural housing policy guidance, which were further commitments at the summit. The Council has put into place these measures and we hope partners and private sector developers will follow suit. Thank you.
Councillor McPherson.
Thank you, Convener, and good morning, members. Mr. Porter, you mentioned the marked reserves and the non-earmarked reserves. For the benefit of anybody watching online who hasn't got access to the committee papers, or for anybody watching this webcast at a later date, could please confirm to the meeting what the earmarked reserves are and the non-earmarked reserves of the council? I know you did say 3% contingency, so that would be helpful. How has the recent interest rate downward trend affected this council's finances? Is that something to our benefit, and is that something we need to look at in the new forecast? And the Chancellor asked all public service to find efficiency savings of 2% minimum. And that's something that this council and I will obviously have to do. Is that something you're confident that we can do, even whether, I mean, was that something we're intending to do anyway, regardless of whether the Chancellor had highlighted it yesterday? And this council and other local authorities in Scotland are currently putting foreign nationals, refugees from war-torn Ukraine, into three-star hotels. Yet we appear to be scratching our council heads and into finding solutions for our elderly and infirm citizens who reside here. How is the refugee programme being funded, and is it being paid for by the council taxpayers? And is that something that we should look at with government for our ageing population? Because our ageing population have signed up to the deal, which is you're going to have to work a lot longer and harder. You ladies can't retire at 60, you're going to have to work to 64 or maybe 65 by the time you reach retirement age. Men, you're going to have to retire at 67, thank you, at 67 or longer, depending when we get there. But the reality is the public have signed up to that, but it would appear that governments and local authorities and NHS haven't. You know, we've accepted the cost is this. We should embrace the fact that we've got an aging population. We should celebrate it that we get to spend extra years with our loved ones. And we should be funding it here from all of the extra taxes. Are we funding it, or how is it be funded going forward? Or are we going to have other issues like the Moss Park Care Home that I know to discuss later today? Is that be an ongoing and annual basis? Thank you.
Thank you, Convener. Councillor McPherson, you refer to our reserves, so as members will have in front of them. So paragraph 9.2 report gives a summary position in terms of the council's earmarked reserves. This is as at the end of the prior financial year. Obviously, the annual accounts gives us a very clear baseline position in terms of reserves. So quoting from a report in front of you, the council has at that point 110.8 million of general fund earmark reserves. To be clear, these are funds earmarked based on specific decisions as members you've made in this chamber, some of which relate to very particular visions, developer contributions linked to legal agreements. Funding received from developers sits within those earmarked balances. So not all of those funds are discretionary in nature. They have legal, contractual, or other commitments associated with them. Other aspects of those earmarked reserves are, of course, based on commitments and purposes, again, agreed through this chamber for investment, for change, for transformation. The other amount quoted in the report, which is separate from those earmarked reserves, is 47.3 million, which is the general fund non-earmarked balance position. Again, as set out in the report, That consists of two things. It's the agreed strategy you have agreed in this chamber to maintain a minimum 3% to deal with unforeseen events and prudent purposes. And on above that, that accounts for around half of the total. The residual being, again, the amounts held to reflect the budget plan agreed in February, recognising there was still going to be a planned use of reserves to support the budget over a 3-year cycle. So I hope that clarifies the position as set out in the report regarding earmarked reserves. You asked about interest rates. Yes, there clearly has been to date, a modest decrease in bank base rates. I think important point to make, and members in Corporate Services Committee will, I'm sure, have heard me say this on a number of points in time. There's not always a direct or near relationship between bank base rates and the rate at which the council borrows. If we borrow from Public Works Loans Board, i.e. HM Treasury, those are linked to government gilts, government bonds. If we borrow from the market, it is market rates that are much more volatile. Ultimately, supply and demand determines the rates that are available from other institutions. So yes, there's been a modest decrease in bank base rate. There are other factors that can influence our borrowing costs. And I think an important point to emphasise is, of course, when we plan and budget, and looking at capital investment, looking at borrowing costs, we are taking account of the best economic forecasts that we can access. So we had always assumed, as most economic forecasts had done, that there would be a reduction in interest rates over the course of 24. So at this stage, I'm not seeing that the interest rate position as of today is going to ease the council's financial position, and to some extent we'd already factored in a reduction in interest rates. What happens over the course of the next year, again, this point in time is somewhat uncertain. What the OBR statements yesterday around Chancellor's budget was actually saying that their forecast is that inflation may trend up over the next few years to sort of 2.6% before starting to ease back. So again, what that might in turn mean in terms of Bank of England decisions clearly is only speculation at this point in time. So, but just to be assured, I mean, we're very actively on a weekly basis monitoring everything we do around treasury management activity, and any opportunities that there are for us to access funds at better rates or the best rates we feel we can access at that point in time. We're absolutely following that through. You mentioned efficiency savings. I think the only point I would make in that is, if you look at that £54 million council agreed in February, that is significantly in excess of a 2% target. That was closer to 9-10% of council activity. So the council has already made decisions for a very significant level of efficiency savings. I commented earlier, our challenge is we will need to find more. I'm not sure there's much I can say in terms of a question around the refugee programme, other than the Scottish Government grants and funding come to the council associated with some of the programmes. I can confirm that. I cannot on what give you a more articulate answer than that. I'm sure our colleagues in House could provide you with further information if required.
Members, I would just urge to have a little bit of caution with any mention of item 15. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you, Brian, for the report. Interesting and fully detailed. Thank you indeed for that. I just want to raise my concerns about 8.3, where we talk about the council tax and the expected council tax increases year on year that we're expecting to see, and particularly into the 2% addition that we're looking at to finance the borrowing commitments of the Highland investment plan. Which would suggest from the report that by implication this could also mean 2% would need to be over and above it in tax assumptions of 5% per annum. I'm just concerned about the impact of a council tax increase 7% year on year on how that's going to work for our constituents and the financial burden that is upon them as we go forward. So I think it's something we really need to be aware and listening to what our constituents are saying about that investment. Thank you.
Councillor Stewart.
Yeah, thank you, convener. There's a couple of points I'd like to make. The first one is in relation to the inflation targets. It's good to see that inflation's came in below the 2% mark. I think that's in part due to the work of the previous government. But this paper acknowledges that, but I don't see any costed impact. I think it'd be really important to see what the cost impact on our assumptions are going to be on that. Now, the national insurance contribution is obviously going to be very challenging for this, and so I think it's important that we all recognise the scope and scale of this challenge, but also make that message clear to the Scottish and UK government that that money needs to come from somewhere, and that the local government funding needs to be adequately adjusted to account for that. Now, I agree with some of what's in this paper. I think it's very early on to take any sort of hard decisions because there's far too much that's unclear to us at this point. And I think it's important that we do get these regular reports. So when we do get more pieces of puzzle, we're in a position to make the right decisions. Now, the second thing I'd like to speak on is income generation. I think it's a really important avenue we explore. We need to make sure that we're getting what we can. Also, I agree with other members, we can't be jeopardising the work of the private and third sector. Now, tourism's a big one, it's a big opportunity, and in my ward alone, it brings in over £211 million, supports nearly 3,000 jobs. Now, one of the key income generation things was a motorhome sticker. The scheme aim is 500,000, but it's only brought in 40,000 to date. There's rumours in the press and in our communities that schemes cost up to £2 million to implement. So, this isn't income generation, this is income losing. This is a complete and utter waste of taxpayers' money. We talk about difficult decisions that have to be made in this council, and we're pouring money down the drain. We talk about hundreds of thousands of pounds we need to make up for this, yet we have overpayments to the staff in excess of £800,000. This council is hammering money due to the mismanagement of this administration. And if we're going to be going cap in hand to the Highland Res to ask them for its councillor Gales up to 7% extra year on year of tax money, we have to do better. We have to show that we are a responsible council and that we can manage the money that we are trusted with better than we currently do, because as it stands, it's not good enough. Members of this council need to do better because the public deserve better.
Bremner.
Councillor Stewart, I'll be more than happy to hear what you've got to offer in terms of mitigating council tax rises between now and the budget incoming. And perhaps you might actually also listen to some of the other council leaders of all parties at COSLA and understanding the challenges that face them, taking their local authorities forward and trying to protect their communities in terms of possible council tax rises. It's not going to be easy, and we will do everything we can here to minimise what that council tax will look at, but it will be part of the budget setting process, and I'll be looking forward to your contributions in being able to mitigate that, since you're so passionate about it. Thanks to Brian for the representation and reminding us of the Chancellor's statement yesterday. Whilst we set our plans year on year, we understand that government markets and other influencing factors actually do influence our ability to be able to provide a stable basis on which to do our financial planning. Others can and do have influence on our ability to deliver. That's no different from previous administrations and won't be for any future administration as well. Our reserves strategy, as we were talking about, provides us with options, but we need to look for best value outcomes, as Councillor Loudon was actually mentioning that earlier on, and we have a reserve strategy to be able to help us in providing for our finances going forward. In terms of quality of information in any paper that would come to the December Council, I'm quite happy to, I would hope that we'd be quite happy to accept that amendment. But, the information that we get, I would caveat that by the information that we get from the Scottish Government. It's just quite a long time to be able to get to the guts of it and understand just what that means for us. So the paper would be limited, I suppose, in the ability to be able to let us know just exactly what level of impact the Scottish Government's settlement might actually look like and have for us. But it'll be part of the budget setting process before, well, that Councillor Christie has been part of that previously. There are challenges for us all in that. I was just mentioned to Councillor Stewart there just now, recognised by COSLA. In respect of our budget engagement, a huge amount of work was undertaken last year, and that's being reviewed in respect of what we've actually been delivering and achieving this year, and how we can feed that back to communities and build on it further, whilst looking at how government funding decisions and what's been changing with governments may impact the need and the need to look at that and how it can be considered. That includes any discussions in respect of pay settlements and other increasing financial factors. And believe you me, that's ongoing, very fluid, as anybody who's following the discussions at COSLA would know. What I can say is that whilst we are working our finances and our budget forward, direct conversations continue to be had and take place between officers, myself, and others, with ministers and cabinet secretaries, to impress our position in matters of importance to us and how budget considerations at a national level affect and effect us. We're doing everything to be able to support and mitigate impacts in our council and our communities. Councillor Stewart, I trust you're doing the exact same with ministers, the direct lines that you have to national government down in London. It would be good if you can support us on that. Thanks very much.
So McIntosh.
Thank you, Convener. Just in the budget yesterday, there was a substantial amount of money to be sent up to Scotland in its grant, more than since devolution began, apparently. All I simply ask is that money comes to local authorities and doesn't disappear into the budget deficit of the Scottish Government. And I ask the administration, through its own links with the Scottish Government and through COSLA, to impress that money is not there to be frittered away on camper vans and boats that never turn up, but is to be used for public services and for local authorities. In fairness to our administration, they have tried hard to mitigate in years gone by, and I trust and I know that they will do so again. But one way will be to impress upon their friends in government in Holyrood through that we need as much of that money as is possible to come. Thank you.
Members, with the acceptance of the amendment proposed by Councillor Christie, can we agree with the recommendations, please? Thank you. Thank you, Brian. Members, we move to item 14 in your agenda. And you're asked that under section 50 of the Local Government Scotland Act 1973 that the public should be excluded from the meeting. Can we agree that, please?